They say its bell tolls without a hand to pull the rope. And some nights, when the fog crawls from the river like pale breath, that sound rolls over the fields as if the land itself were mourning. No one remembers who built the chapel. The oldest folks in Dunmar Hollow will tell you it was already standing when their grandmothers were children. A squat, whitewashed thing with a roof blackened by storms and the scent of iron in its rafters. It crouches at the far edge of the cotton rows, where the ground sinks slightly, as though the earth once burned there and never quite healed. In daylight, it seems harmless enough, a ruin being slowly reclaimed by kudzu and dust. But at dusk the air thickens. The magnolias along the fence lean inward, their blossoms open too wide, their fragrance sick-sweet as if they are waiting for something to stir inside. Old men at the tavern claim the soil drinks too deeply. They say you can bury a thing there, a bird, a prayer, a memory, and by morning the ground will have taken it whole, leaving only a dark patch that never dries. Some nights the cotton roots glisten red, though no rain has fallen. No one goes near enough to test the stories. The bell itself hangs crooked, tongue rusted, rope long rotted away. Yet every few months, someone swears they hear it toll across the valley. Always 13 times, always at midnight. Those who count each strike say the sound feels closer with every note, until the last one hums behind their teeth. Once, a farmhand walking home through the rows said the mist rose sudden and thick, white as candle smoke, curling around his knees. He thought he saw shapes moving through it, bowed heads, clasped hands, a procession of the faithful without faces. When he ran, his lantern went out, though the wick still burned. They found him the next morning sitting at the chapel door, eyes open, lips moving as if in prayer. He has not spoken since. Inside, the pews rot in neat lines. The floorboards sag, yet no dust lies upon them. When the wind passes through the broken windows, the candles on the altar flicker to life for a heartbeat, blue-white as the flame of a gas lamp. No one lights them. No one dares. The locals leave offerings on the steps, a bottle of milk, a folded letter, a silver locket, then hurry away before the sun sinks. They whisper that the chapel listens, that its timbers still remember every confession whispered into its dark. The children who grow up here learn early. Never answer if someone calls your name from the fields after dusk. Sometimes it is only the wind. Sometimes it is not. On the evening the story begins, a storm was moving in from the coast, dragging its belly across the sky. Thunder rolled like drums from the mountains, and the horizon burned faintly violet. Through that bruised light, a lone rider approached along the muddy track. A nun, her habit soaked, her white coif streaked with ash from the road. She dismounted at the chapel gate, boots sinking in the wet clay, and lifted her gaze to the sagging cross above the door. For a moment, lightning split the sky. In that flash the bell shimmered as if struck, not moving, yet humming a note too low to be sound. The nun felt it in her chest, in the hollow of her throat, and she whispered, "Lord, deliver me." But the wind answered first. She pushed the door open. The hinges shrieked, and the air inside smelled of rain on iron, sharp, old, familiar. A single pew stood upright, clean as though it had just been polished. On its seat lay a handful of magnolia petals, fresh and glistening, though every tree outside was bare. Her candle trembled in the draught. The light painted shadows that leaned toward her, long and thin as if drawn by breath, and somewhere above, in the blackened rafters, the bell gave one slow, hollow beat. She froze. Outside the storm howled, but within every sound seemed swallowed. Then came another toll, softer yet unmistakable, and with it the faint rustle of cloth, the whisper of feet across dry boards. The nun turned toward the altar. There was no one there, only the flame bending sideways, the petals stirring, and a trail of wet footprints leading deeper into the dark. The bell tolled again, a third time, though no rope moved, and in the silence that followed, something unseen exhaled near her ear, carrying the scent of magnolia and earth freshly turned. The candle guttered out. Morning broke like pale glass, weak light seeping through a shroud of fog that clung to the valley and refused to lift. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in the trees, a low murmur like voices arguing beneath the earth. By the time the riders from St. Aurelia's convent reached the chapel, the air was already heavy with that strange sweetness, magnolia and rust. The Mother Superior dismounted first, her habit stiff with dew, her expression drawn taut by years of discipline and sleepless nights. Behind her came the others, 3 sisters, young and quiet, their rosaries clicking faintly as they walked. They found the newcomer kneeling at the altar. Her candle had long since melted into a puddle of wax beside her hand. She did not stir as they entered, only her lips moved, forming silent words that looked like prayer or apology. The Mother Superior touched her shoulder gently. "Child," she whispered, "your journey ends here." The kneeling woman raised her head. Her eyes were ringed with red, but dry, too dry. "It called," she murmured. "I followed the sound of his bell." The others exchanged uneasy glances. No one had mentioned the bell. They settled in the rectory beside the chapel, a house that leaned like an old drunk, its chimney cracked and its walls softened by moss. The convent had sent them to restore the place, or perhaps to bury it quietly beneath fresh hymns and good intentions. But from the first evening, the air refused to behave. Candles burned blue, water turned bitter. The crucifix above the hearth leaned ever so slightly to the left, no matter how often it was straightened, and always, from somewhere beyond the cotton fields came the faint sound of tolling, too slow for the living, too measured for the wind. The sisters took to praying in shifts. One by one they began to murmur of dreams, corridors of stone that dripped with rain though no rain fell, hands folded over coffins that whispered back, hymns sung backward in tongues no one knew. Only the new sister, Sister Miriam she called herself, slept soundly. When asked why, she said, "Because I am expected." No one dared ask by whom. On the 3rd night she rose before matins and stepped barefoot into the fog. Her breath came out in clouds, the only warmth in the world. The chapel stood ahead, half consumed by mist, its steeple vanishing into the pale air. She entered without fear. The pews seemed to shift in the gloom, some closer than before, some farther, as if the room itself had rearranged to greet her. A soft dripping came from somewhere near the altar. Miriam lit a candle, shielding the flame with her palm. The wax pooled, trembling. In the light she saw that the dripping was from the crucifix, water, clear and steady, running from the wounds. It gathered in the chalice below, filling it to the brim. Her reflection wavered on the surface, but another face rippled beside it, darker, older, hollow-eyed. A voice came with it, faint as wind through the organ pipes. "You prayed for a sign, I am the answer." The candle flared, then dimmed. She turned, but the chapel was empty. Only the bell rope, torn and frayed, swayed gently, though there was no draught. When the other sisters found her at dawn, she stood at the threshold, her veil soaked and her hands clasped, as if to warm something invisible between them. "Did you ring it?" one asked. Miriam looked at her, serene and distant. "No," she said softly. "It rang for me." By week's end, things began to shift. The fields nearest the chapel refused to bear cotton. Only wildflowers bloomed there now, pale and waxy, their petals opening and closing with the sun. The chapel door no longer shut properly. It would swing open at odd hours as if breathing. At night, the sisters heard footsteps pacing above the ceiling, though there was no attic. The Mother Superior called for silence and faith. "Temptation dwells in doubt," she warned. "Keep your eyes on the cross." But Miriam, alone in her cell, kept her eyes on the window, the one that looked toward the chapel. Sometimes in the silver half-light before dawn, she saw a figure standing just inside its doorway, unmoving, waiting. Once she rose and whispered, "Who waits for me?" The fog pressed its cold face against the glass, and from the dark beyond came the faint clang of iron. 1, 2, 3 times. That night, the magnolias bloomed again, though the frost had already come. Their scent filled every room, sweet enough to choke. By morning, the chapel bell had fallen silent, and inside the convent, beneath Sister Miriam's bed, the floorboards were damp, as if something had been weeping below. The wind rose at sundown, and the fields swayed like an ocean of white ghosts. The Mother Superior walked the path to the chapel, her rosary coiling and uncoiling in her hand. She paused before the door, listening. Nothing, only the faint hum of flies beneath the eaves. Then a sigh, not from within, but beneath. She knelt, pressed her ear to the ground. For a long moment, silence. Then, the unmistakable rhythm of breath. Slow, steady, deep. Something sleeping, something waiting to be remembered. And as she lifted her head, the bell above gave one soft toll, just one, yet the sound lingered long after the air fell still. The first night it spoke, no one believed her. Sister Miriam had risen before dawn, candle in hand, tracing her steps through the narrow hall that led to the chapel. The boards creaked like sighs under her feet, each sound swallowed by the stillness that lived there. She meant to pray. Instead, she listened. The air felt wrong, thick, humming, awake. Then beneath her came the whisper. Not a sound exactly, but a vibration, a tremor that seemed to rise from the foundation itself. The candle flickered. Her heartbeat matched its pulse. And when she bent down, pressing her ear to the wood, the murmur became a word, her name. Drawn out slow, tender, sorrowful, Miriam. She staggered back, clutching the candle to her chest. The light trembled across the altar rail, glancing off the chalice still half filled with water that no one dared touch. For a moment she thought she saw the surface stir, ripples spreading as though disturbed by breath. Then silence again, deep, complete. By morning the others found her pale and trembling. She told them of the voice. Sister Agnes crossed herself and refused to speak further. Sister Clare whispered that perhaps it was the old priest who had served there once, the one buried under the chapel's foundation, whose name had been scratched off the convent ledger. The Mother Superior forbade them to talk of it. "Walls remember what we give them," she said. "Stop giving them fear." But the walls remembered anyway. That evening, when the sisters gathered for prayer, a strange chill rolled through the nave. The candles leaned as if pushed by unseen hands. The air grew thick with the scent of wet soil and wax. Then a groan. Low, long aching. The floorboard shifted, not cracking but breathing. Every woman froze where she knelt. The sound came again, a dragging like fabric sliding over wood, followed by a hollow knock from beneath the pews. 1, 2, 3. Then stillness. The Mother Superior's voice was the first to break. "Keep your eyes on your prayers," she whispered, her words trembling. "If you do not look, it cannot find your face." The sisters obeyed, all but Miriam. Her gaze fell upon the space beneath her pew. The darkness there seemed thicker, almost shaped. The longer she looked, the more it seemed to breathe. And then she heard it again. Closer this time, the voice not rising from below, but within the wood. It spoke with the cadence of prayer, half words, half weeping. "Forgive! Forgive! Deliver!" Her candle went out. They fled to the rectory after that, all but Miriam, who lingered at the chapel door. The fog had rolled in thick and silver, pressing its cold body against the windows. She thought she saw something move inside it, the suggestion of shoulders, the faint turn of a head. That night she did not sleep. The voice followed her into her cell, soft as breath against her ear. She prayed until her throat went raw, but it kept whispering through the rhythm of her pulse. When morning came, she found her floor damp. The boards under her bed had darkened, swollen with moisture. When she touched them, her fingers came away smelling faintly of river water. Days passed. The sound beneath the chapel grew bolder. Sometimes it was laughter, thin and papery. Sometimes it was the scrape of fingernails. Once, when the wind was still and no one dared to breathe, they all heard the voice reciting scripture, not in Latin but in English, slow and deliberate. As though trying to remember what it once believed, Miriam began to speak back, not aloud at first, just in thought, an instinct she couldn't name. The voice would call and she would answer, her lips moving silently in rhythm with its sighs. The other sisters noticed her pallor, the way she flinched at silence. One night Sister Clare shook her awake and said, "It's not him, Miriam. You must know that. Whatever's under there, it listens because it's hungry." Miriam smiled weakly. All hunger begins with prayer. On the 6th night the bell rang again, 13 times. With each toll the walls quivered. Dust sifted from the rafters, settling like ash in their hair. The Mother Superior cried out for the sisters to leave, to run for the main convent before the roof gave way. But Miriam was already at the altar, kneeling, listening. The floor trembled beneath her knees. The boards flexed, not cracking but swelling upward as if something beneath pressed against them. The others screamed her name. She did not turn. "So you called for him," the voice said, rising like water through wood. "I came first." The board split. A rush of cold air filled the chapel, stinking of mud and magnolia rot. The candlelight whirled, extinguished, and for a moment everything was still, save for the faint sound of breathing, shared between two beings on opposite sides of the floor. Then, the sound of nails sliding through earth. At dawn, the chapel stood empty. The pews were overturned, the altar cloth gone. The floor before the cross gaped open, a long, jagged wound revealing dark soil below, and from that hollow, faint and rhythmic, came the sound of a bell rope moving, though no hand touched it, tolling, slowly, patiently, as though counting down. Morning found the sisters in silence. The chapel door hung open, its hinges breathing in the wind. The floor gaped where Sister Miriam had knelt. Soil was scattered in crescents, damp as if something had clawed upward to meet her. They did not speak her name. To name what had happened might give it shape. The Mother Superior crossed herself and set a single candle on the altar, a vigil for the lost. Its flame shivered once, then steadied, tall and gold against the ruin. She whispered, "Light for the departed." But by nightfall the candle still burned untouched, its wax unspilled. The others kept watch in turns. Each sister swore she had seen the wick shorten. Each swore it had not. The same length, the same clean lip of wax, as if time itself could not touch it. When Sister Agnes leaned close, she felt warmth, but no heat, a living light that did not sting the eyes. Beneath its glow, the cracks in the floor seemed to move, widening and closing like lips in silent prayer. At midnight, the wind fell away. The candle gave a single pop, a sound like breath being drawn. Then the room filled with the faint perfume of magnolia and river silt. They carried the candle to the rectory, hoping distance might dull its power. It did not. Placed upon the mantel, it lit the entire room, though its flame was no bigger than a tear. The shadows bent toward it, longer than they should have been. Sister Claire pressed her palm against the wall and whispered, "It's watching." No one answered. At the third hour, the flame grew white. Faces seemed to drift inside it, not clear, only impressions. A brow, a pair of closed eyes, the suggestion of a mouth murmuring words too faint to hear. The sisters fell to their knees. From somewhere below the floor came the bell, tolling once, some soft, distant warning. By dawn, exhaustion overcame them. The candle still burned. Its wax had begun to drip, then reverse, crawling back up the taper, as if unwilling to be spent. The Mother Superior lifted it carefully and carried it into the chapel. The air inside was colder than before, still heavy with the smell of turned earth. She placed the candle upon the altar again. "Lord," she said, her voice breaking, "if this be your light, let it burn. If not, let it die." The flame bowed low as though listening. Then it brightened, a sudden furious gold that cast her shadow all the way to the open door. For a heartbeat, she saw another silhouette beside hers, thin, stooped, head bowed in imitation of prayer. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was alone, but the candle had not moved. Its wick whispered, "Still here." That evening, the sisters heard footsteps again, circling the rectory, slow and deliberate. Each pass brushed the windows, leaving fog prints that never faded. They gathered in the chapel for comfort, though comfort had long since fled that place. The candle greeted them with steady light. Its flame had turned a pale, spectral blue. It no longer flickered. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Sister Agnes began to pray aloud. Her voice trembled, then steadied. The words of the psalm echoed off the rafters and seemed to come back changed, older, cracked by distance. With each verse, the flame grew dimmer, shrinking until it was no more than a spark. A sigh went through the chapel, relief, disbelief. The sisters wept, then the spark flared. A blinding bloom of white filled the room, swallowing walls, pews, breath. When the glare faded, the candle stood renewed, untouched, taller even than before. Wax pooled at its base in the perfect shape of folded hands. The sisters fled, only the Mother Superior remained. She sank to her knees before it. "What do you want?" she whispered. From deep beneath the chapel came a low sound. Not the bell this time, but the groan of the earth opening wider. The light trembled once more, and in it she thought she saw a figure kneeling beside the hole. Veiled, serene, eyes closed in devotion. The flame bent toward her, and the air tasted of salt and iron. She reached out, not in faith but in fear. The candle did not burn her. It only pulsed once beneath her palm, as if a heart beat there, then stilled. The silence afterward was enormous. When she withdrew her hand, her fingers were black with soot, and upon the wall behind the altar, a shadow remained. The outline of a woman's face turned upward toward light. Outside, dawn crept over the fields. The magnolias bowed under frost, their petals glistening like wet wax. In the chapel window, a single flame glowed, visible even in daylight, and far below the floorboards a faint voice murmured in rhythm with its flicker, "Light for the lost. Light for the lost." Then came the bell, one slow toll that carried clear across the valley, and the sound of wax dripping where no candle stood. They said the orchard had been planted over bones. Each tree grew taller than it should, its roots drinking more than rain. From the chapel window, the branches looked like hands raised in silent pleading. At dusk, a wind came from the east, slow, heavy, and wrong. The magnolia petals fell backward, upward, drawn toward something unseen in the dark between the rows. That was when they saw him. He did not walk as a living man walks. He moved between the trunks like a ripple under ice, shoulders bowed, face hidden by the hood of twilight. The first sister to glimpse him swore she smelled candle smoke and river mud, and heard the bell toll once, though no rope had been pulled. Sister Claire whispered, "It's the one who listens when we pray." The Mother Superior hushed her. "No one listens here but God." Yet the shape kept moving closer each night, pausing where the light from the chapel spilled into the orchard like a blade. By the third night, the sisters began marking the doors with chalk and psalms. They did not sleep. The orchard rustled, though there was no wind. Every fruit that fell bore a small dark bruise shaped like a thumbprint. At midnight, the Mother Superior stood by the window, candle in hand. The light trembled against the glass. There, between the trees, a figure stood facing her. Not moving, not breathing, only the faint shine of eyes reflecting her candle's glow. She whispered, "Show yourself." The orchard answered with silence. Then came the sound of footsteps, deliberate, circling the chapel walls. At dawn they found the footprints, bare, deep and black with soil too wet to have come from dry ground. They led from the orchard to the chapel door and stopped there. No prints went back. That day the sky hung low and red, and the bell rope moved without wind. Each toll seemed to drag light out of the world. When the sun fell, the orchard bloomed again, every blossom open at once, white as bone, and beneath them the ground swelled, as though something beneath were pushing upward, seeking air. That night Sister Agnes dreamed of the chapel filled with trees. Branches rose where pews once stood. From every bough hung rosaries of teeth and seed pods that rattled like rain. And in the pulpit stood the man, his face pale as wax, whispering a prayer in a language older than the cross. When she woke, her hands smelled of soil. In her bed lay a single apple, half rotten, half ripe. The Mother Superior gathered the sisters. "We are being asked to remember," she said. "But we have forgotten what." They buried the apple beneath the altar and prayed until their throats bled. Outside the orchard shimmered, each tree bending, as if listening. Then the bell tolled once more, and in the echo between its dying notes, a voice whispered through the leaves, "Light for the lost." When the sisters looked to the window, they saw the orchard ablaze, not in fire, but in light, cold and white, the kind that shows every sin at once. And between the trunks, walking slowly toward the chapel, came the man. He carried no shadow, only the scent of magnolia and the sound of a heartbeat that was not his own. The chapel no longer slept. Its timbers creaked like bones turning in a grave, and the air trembled with the scent of damp wood and candle soot. Every night, the bell tolled once, not to mark an hour, but to remind them that time still owed a debt. The sisters began to hear whispers under the hymns, not voices of angels, but something lower, older, like prayers said backward, and always, beneath their feet, a steady pulse. Thump, 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 as if the chapel itself had grown a heart. When the floor first shifted, they thought it the wind, but then came a hollow sound, the unmistakable crack of wood yielding to pressure below. Sister Agnes knelt, pressed her ear to the planks, and heard breathing. She recoiled. "Something's under us," she gasped. The Mother Superior fetched the lantern. Its flames swayed, casting long ribs of light across the floor. At the center of the aisle, near the altar's shadow, one board quivered, gently, rhythmically, as though stirred by breath. They pried it open. Beneath lay a hollow no larger than a coffin, filled with black earth. But buried within that earth was a book, bound in cracked leather, its cover damp and warm to the touch. When the Mother Superior lifted it, the air thickened. The candle flames bowed low, one by one. Upon the first page, words were carved rather than inked, as if written by nail or bone. The script was uneven, fevered. It began, "Forgive me, Father, for I have buried my sin beneath your house." Each line bled darker as they read. It spoke of a voice beneath the river, of a promise taken before dawn, and of a light that refused to die. The last entry ended mid-sentence, the words swallowed by a streak of something brown and dry. Then faintly beneath the boards, the whisper came again, the same voice as in the orchard, "Light for the lost." Sister Claire dropped the lantern. The flame guttered but did not die. Smoke rose from between the planks, smelling of magnolia and old wax. The Mother Superior clutched the book to her chest. "It belongs to the one who built this chapel," she whispered, "and he never left." The others stared at her, waiting for the rest, but she only looked toward the altar, where the candle that would not die still burned, unchanged, eternal. She opened the book again, and this time the pages turned of their own accord. They stopped at a blank page. Words began to appear, carved into being by an unseen hand. "You have opened the ground. The ground remembers." The sisters fled, but not far. Outside, the orchard had withered overnight. Every tree stood black and leafless. Each trunk split down the middle as though by lightning. From their hollow centers, sap dripped, thick, red and slow. Behind them, the chapel door slammed shut. Inside, the Mother Superior remained, the book open before her. The air pulsed. The boards beneath her knees began to rise and fall, slow, deliberate, matching her heartbeat. She whispered, "What do you want of me?" And from the hollow came an answer, soft but sure, "Confess." The book fell open once more. This time the words were hers, though she had never written them. "I saw him in the orchard. I let him in. I lit the candle. I lied to God." She dropped the book. The boards beneath her split, and cold air rushed upward, heavy with river scent. From below came the toll of the bell, once, then twice, as soil began to pour upward like breath reversed. A shape rose from the hollow, faceless, nameless, clothed in prayer and shadow. It stood where the altar had been, its head bowed, its hands clasped as if in eternal benediction, and from within its chest came the same pulse that shook the floor, the chapel's own heartbeat. The Mother Superior fell to her knees. "Lord, have mercy," she whispered. The figure raised its head. Its voice was her own. He did. Then the floor sealed shut again, smooth and clean, as though it had never been broken. The candle on the altar flickered once, and two shadows appeared where there had been one. They found it by accident. While cleaning soot from the altar wall, Sister Claire's cloth caught on something hard, a thin edge, metal and cold. She pried away the plaster, and the wall itself gave a sound like a sigh. Beneath the crumbling whitewash lay a mirror, tall and blackened by age. No one had known it was there. The Mother Superior crossed herself, though she could not say why. Mirrors had no place in a chapel. They reflected too much. By daylight, the glass showed nothing but dim light and dust. But at dusk, when the candle that would not die began to glow, the surface changed. Shapes stirred inside. The outline of pews, a doorway, the faint curve of a kneeling figure. It did not show the room as it was, but as it had been. Sister Agnes leaned closer. Behind her reflection stood another woman, face veiled in shadow. Agnes turned, but no one was there. When she looked back, the veiled figure had raised its head. From that night on, the mirror refused to stay dull. It shimmered even in darkness, breathing softly like a living thing. If one listened long enough, a faint ticking could be heard within it. not of a clock but of something counting, patient and precise. The Mother Superior ordered the mirror covered with a sheet, but each morning the cloth lay folded neatly on the floor, corners squared, untouched by dust. They prayed, but the mirror listened. Sometimes it answered, a flicker of light, a pulse of movement behind the glass. On the seventh night, Sister Clare dreamt she walked into the chapel and found the mirror uncovered. Her reflection smiled, though she had not. When she woke, she saw faint marks on her palms, 5 small bruises, as if a hand had pressed against hers from the other side. The next evening she went alone to the altar. She lit the candle and stared into the mirror's heart. Behind her reflection stood the entire choir of sisters, faces blurred, eyes shut. Only one had her eyes open, a dark figure in the center, watching. Clare whispered, "What do you want?" The mirror trembled. From its depths came a sound like breath drawn through water. Letters formed upon the glass, as if written by invisible fingers. "Remember what you buried." She staggered back, knocking over the candle. Its flame spilled across the floor but left no burn, only a trail of light leading to the door of the cellar. At dawn, the sisters found the mirror veiled again. But beneath the cloth, faint images still moved, slow, solemn, like figures walking in procession. The Mother Superior dared to touch the frame. It was warm, as if someone had just stepped away. "We will seal it," she said. "No more looking." But that night the chapel bell tolled backward, 12 down to 1, and the mirror's covering slid to the floor by itself. In the glass the sisters saw not themselves, but the chapel empty, sunlight slanting through broken windows, and far in the reflection's corner a single candle burned, its light breathing in rhythm with their hearts. No bell in Virginia was meant to toll 13 times, yet on the 13th night after the mirror was found, the sound came, heavy, metallic and wrong, shaking the chapel to its roots. The first stroke split the sky. The second made the candle's flame bow low. By the 5th, frost bloomed on the inside of the windows, and by the 13th, even the air had gone still, as if the world had paused to listen. The sisters ran to the tower, but the rope hung motionless. Each ring seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere, from the earth, the river, the orchard, the very bones of the chapel itself. Sister Clare pressed her hand to the bell's iron lip. It was cold, yet it trembled like flesh. She whispered, "Who rings you?" From far below, beneath the stones and graves, came the echo of her own voice, "I do." By morning the valley was changed. Mist clung to the fields, thick and silver, rising in slow coils that shaped themselves into human forms before dissolving. The magnolias had begun to bloom out of season again, white then red, then white once more, as if the trees could not decide what season they belonged to. The townsfolk heard the 13 tolls too. They came to the chapel steps, hats in hand, afraid to cross the threshold. "It rings for the forgotten," an old man murmured. "Best let the dead finish their prayers." Inside, the Mother Superior gathered her flock. "This house," she said, "was built to remember, but something in it remembers us instead." They knelt and prayed until their knees bled, yet with every prayer the bell answered, one slow, patient toll for each plea for mercy. When the prayers stopped, the bell did too. That night the mirror flickered again. In its depths they saw the tower, but its shape was wrong, taller, leaning, its stones gleaming as if wet. At its summit hung the bell, still silent, waiting. Then without touch it began to swing. 1, 2, 3, the sisters screamed and fled, but the sound followed, echoing from every wall, from every heartbeat. Even the candle's flame beat in time to the 13th toll. At the final strike the chapel floor shook. Dust rained from the rafters, and in the silence after, a faint voice whispered through the bell's hollow mouth. 13 for the ones who stayed. None left to ring 14. The next morning the tower door was found ajar. Footprints led upward, only one set, yet no one ever saw who made them. At the top the bell hung still, its surface damp with dew that smelled faintly of iron and river water. Inside the curve of its metal was a handprint, small, black and perfectly clean. When the sun set, the bell tolled once more, soft, distant, mournful. And this time it rang not over the fields but beneath them. The sisters fell silent, listening to the sound fade into the earth. Somewhere deep below something was answering. toll for toll in a place where no bell should be. By the time the 13th toll faded, the air around the chapel felt heavier, thick as breath before a storm. The walls exhaled a faint mist that clung to the floor, creeping toward the altar like smoke returning to a long, cold fire. Every prayer sounded muffled, as though spoken underwater, and in the center of the chapel, beneath the wooden cross, the ground had begun to rise. It started with a trembling up as soft, rhythmic, like the slow drawing of a heartbeat from deep below. Then came a crack that wound its way between the pews, splitting the aisle in two. From that narrow wound seeped a low, luminous light, neither warm nor cold. But aware, the sisters gathered, afraid to look. Afraid not to, the Mother Superior whispered. This is where it began. No one asked what it was. They all knew. The cross above the altar swayed, though no wind touched it. Its shadow stretched across the chapel floor, long and dark, until it touched the crack in the earth. When wood met light, the trembling stopped, and the shadow froze as if nailed into the ground. From beneath the floor came the faint sound of weeping. Not one voice, but many. Soft, layered, pleading. The mirror behind the altar shimmered. For the briefest moment, the sisters saw themselves reflected upside down, as though the world on the other side had finally turned over. The Mother Superior stepped forward and placed her hands on the floorboards. The light pulsed in answer. Her rosary, worn smooth from decades of prayer, snapped apart, the beads rolling like drops of blood across the stone. She said, "Every sin spoken here was buried, not absolved. The earth remembers what the tongue forgets." The others joined her, their hands pressed to the trembling ground, and one by one, faint lines of light rose from beneath their palms, threading through the cracks like veins of gold. They were being bound, not by rope, but by memory. The bell did not ring that night. Instead, the sound came from beneath them, a slow hum, deep and resonant, the tone of something vast and unseen turning in its sleep. Dust fell from the rafters in thin, trembling ribbons. The candle that would not die flared white, then blue, then clear as water. Through its glow, the sisters saw shapes moving beneath the floor, hands clasping hands, faces pressed to the underside of the boards, mouths forming silent words. Sister Claire whispered, "They're praying with us." The Mother Superior shook her head. "No," she said. "They're keeping us here." The light grew brighter until the chapel seemed suspended in it. Everything, the pews, the cross, the very air, shimmered like glass about to shatter. Then, just as suddenly, the glow folded inward and sank back into the earth, leaving only stillness. When the sisters dared to look up, they found the cross perfectly upright again, unmoving. But its base had changed, no longer wood but stone, carved with names none of them had ever spoken aloud, their own. Outside, the valley lay silent under a windless sky. The magnolias had stopped blooming. Even the river seemed to hold its breath, and deep within the chapel, beneath the cross, a heartbeat continued, slow, measured, eternal, as if the chapel itself had drawn in the sisters' prayers and sealed them there, forever part of its walls. From the mirror came one last whisper, faint as candle smoke, light for the lost, bound in his house. Morning came late that day. The sun did not rise, but it bled. A pale red gold seeped across the horizon like a wound reopening, spilling thin light into the chapel through its cracked stained glass. For the first time in 13 nights, the air smelled clean, not of wax or earth or decay, but of rain long past. No bell rang. No footsteps echoed. The pews stood empty, their wood warped by candle soot and whispered sin. Where the sisters once knelt, only their habits remained, folded neatly, untouched by dust. The rosaries had turned to salt, and beneath the altar, the cross pulsed faintly with warmth, as though the stone still remembered the weight of their hands. The mirror behind it was no longer dark. Its surface had gone milk-white like frozen breath, but when the light touched it, faint shapes stirred within, silhouettes moving as if behind a veil. They did not reach out. They simply watched. By dusk, travelers passing through the valley saw the chapel from the road and swore they heard hymns, thin and sweet, drifting through the open doors. Yet when they entered, the sound vanished, leaving only the echo of wings. They said the walls glowed faintly in the dark, as though the place had swallowed sunlight and could not bear to give it back. No priest ever came again. No mass was held, And still the candles relit themselves each night, one by one in silence. On the 13th evening, a storm broke without thunder. Rain fell like tears against the windows, washing the soot away until the glass shone clear once more. Through it, a single beam of moonlight struck the altar, and for a moment the chapel breathed. The mirror shimmered, not with the faces of the sisters, but with the reflection of the empty pews, the silent cross and the open door beyond. Then, softly, the white faded to silver, and the mirror cracked. When the villagers came at dawn, the chapel was gone. Only the foundation stones remained, and in their center a patch of soil where nothing would ever grow, yet was always warm to the touch. They built no new church there. Some said the land was hallowed. Others said it was waiting. But on certain mornings, when the fog rose too fast, the valley shimmered with a faint, rose-colored glow, and if one listened closely, they could hear the faint sound of 13 voices humming in unison beneath the earth, not in grief. Not in prayer, in peace the light had returned, but it did not leave them where it found them.